Good morning, folks. Good afternoon. I've yet to settle on like a consistent, reliable intro for this very program. But welcome back to the Bert. Happy double or nothing week. As I have told many of you in recent days, I have big plans for this week to be a fun one. This is just the start. We are going to do something a little bit different today, which I'll explain momentarily. But if you are watching on Twitch, thanks for joining us live. If you're watching on YouTube in about 2 hour delay, give us one of those thumbs up gimmicks if you think this is any good, so on and so forth. Now, in many ways, this show feels like a mere appetizer for the day. Later this evening, we're doing Grin Grappler, the William Regal edition, which I'm very excited about. I've watched, most of those matches like 3 or 4 times now at this point, which has been a lot of fun. And so that is tonight on Twitch. That will be at 6 p.m. Eastern, and I'm going to probably upload it to YouTube tomorrow. But today is something a little bit different. Now, for those who don't know, if you're somehow new and have stumbled upon this, the title is a little bit provocative. So maybe you have. There we go. Is that better? I don't know. Usually, the Monday show is a weekend review of sorts. Is basically, the wrestling that happened on the weekend. Well, let's talk it through. Some of it I see in kind of full events. Some I see in bits and pieces, and we just talk about the main matches. This has been a thing that I've done on this platform or on Fightful for, a long time now. Once upon a time, there was a show, which we're going to bring back soon, called My Match Monday, where you guys gave me matches to review and I reviewed them. Well, today is going to be something slightly different, but closer to that than the norm. As far as I know, there was not any real, kind of must discuss, must watch pro wrestling on the weekend. I do want to watch Eddie and Davey Richards at some point, but other than that, I think it was mostly, pretty quiet week for professional wrestling. Calm before the storm, so to speak. So what I thought I'd do is, to mark Double or Nothing week, and it's not just Double or Nothing, right? It's the 3-year anniversary of AEW. They're back in Vegas after 2 very unpredictable years where they couldn't do their, planned locations for these events. I thought I would put together a list. Now, I want to stress this. This is very important, and the title will suggest it, but I want to reiterate it. There's a key word in the title. Favorite. Okay? That's the key word I want to stress throughout this program. Favorite. This is not my opinion or my read on the top 10 best AEW matches. Well, pay-per-view matches, I should say, because best altogether would be very different because their TV is loaded with classics. However, instead it is my top 10 favorite AEW pay-per-view matches. Now, a couple of things to know before we get into this. I don't waste too much time. A couple key points. Number 1, while I've gone back and watched much of the early AEW shows, I was not watching them in real time other than the first one itself. So that stuff doesn't click in the brain the same way it does when I watched it live. Okay? That's one key thing. Another key thing, while it was greatly appreciated at the time, outside of one outlier, which will make sense when we get to it, this is very, very key. Very, very key. On rewatch, I think the empty arena stuff struggles greatly. And I mean that as no slight at the many wonderful performances that were put in, and we all needed pro wrestling during that time, as silly as it sounds, as embarrassing as it sounds. I think we did, especially when it was, when they were actually doing it vaguely safely as one can anyway, if that ever happened. I just find a lot of that stuff takes a real beating on rewatch. Wrestling in that setting is just not what wrestling is to me. I'm sorry. So a lot of those matches are going to fall off. A couple of them get honorable mentions. There's one that makes the list because I think it's a unique case, which you probably can see where I'm going with that. You won't have to wait long for that one. So if you're wondering where, if it isn't mentioned, it's because, frankly, I just thought on rewatch it was really difficult to recapture how, the excitement of the initial watch because there's no audience. It's really, really challenging. Now, I mentioned rewatch a lot there. And let me kind of elaborate. Every match on here, I have rewatched in some form or fashion. almost more importantly, every match on here, if you said to me, Joe, let's do a rewatch right now, I'd be into the idea. That is not the case for all objectively great matches. There are matches that are tremendous and well worked and had great heat live and was epic and dramatic, but I don't necessarily want to run them back anytime soon. In that case, I don't consider them to be a favorite. That's just me. This is my kind of rough criteria here. I'm going to get into my list. First, I'm going to open a Pepsi Max. Chat, here's the deal. If you put your list in the chat or you put like your specific favorite, I'll put on the screen. Like, for example, Cody says, seeing Kenneth Hanger versus the Bucks at the first Revolution here live in Chicago was something else. That's interesting and may come up later. If you have a list, put it in the chat and I'll try and spotlight best I can. If you would like to send a tip with your list, then feel free, because I am intrigued. Because I do think, frankly, as I'm told, that Jeff Jarrett is going to be the next Broken Skull Session guest, which rules on June 3rd, I believe that's it. So if you have any, you want to put your own list in there, if you want to put your favorite in there, like Tope Suicida says, Kingston versus Punk, or if you have a comment, question, something else, and you want to send a tip, streamlabs.com/late-night-grid. Now, with the formalities out of the way, and I'm going to reiterate the favorite part again and again to not get in trouble. I'm now going to open this Pepsi Max. That fellow he was a little rugged, He made that hard for me. And we're going to get into our list. I have a few honorable mentions. I would like to reference them here. I will not elaborate in the same degree I will for the others, but I don't want to reference them. One of two matches from Double or Nothing 2020 that stand on this kind of 5-match list that wouldn't necessarily have been mentioned, but I think when I read them, they came to mind in a different way, and I just wanted to show some love to them. One that I have to say, I had totally, for whatever reason, the brain had just lost, because I thought this was a TV match. The weaponry-filled Shida Nyla match, I actually rewatched after seeing it on a list, and I was like, I remember them wrestling. I don't remember this particular. I think maybe I was getting confused with the Vicky Guerrero business too, which I think was Full Gear or was later, whenever it was. I want to give a shout out to that, because that is a real blast, and I think that's almost completely lost, because that pay-per-view is remembered for 2 matches, which I may or may not be mentioning very shortly here. That one, I wanted to show some love to it. I think it's the strongest women's title match the pay-per-views have hosted. I do find Britt and Chris Statlander to be a lot of fun. And if you want to go outside of the AEW realm, Serena and Riho, I'm pretty sure it's for the NWA, I want to say. So, if not, it was just a great match anyway. So, a couple notes there. Sticking with Double or Nothing 2020. John Moxley, Brody Lee. This is one that I think we'll always remember very, very fondly, and was an extraordinary match and violent. And the big thing for me that I'll always remember about this was that as a Brody fan, I remember being concerned about the start to his AEW run. I didn't love the kind of Vince McMahon parody elements to the character, but I was of the belief and of the hope, at least, that when push came to shove and it was time to get in there and wrestle, he was going to do what he does, and I thought he absolutely did here. He was great in this. Again, I think it's hurt by the setting on rewatch and such, but it's a very significant match in AEW history. And, it's kind of bittersweet. Not kind of, it is bittersweet. It's a terrible shame that we didn't get more Brody Lee AEW title matches, but there are more important things in life. And obviously, it's the least of anyone's worries when you think of Brody. But it is a shame. The one he got was great. Him and Moxley were natural dance partners. So I thought I'd mention that. Okay, a couple others here. Now moving into 2021. These are just still honorable mentions, folks. Just wanted to make a note of them. This match isn't probably in the top 50 in terms of best, but I had to mention it as a potential favorite. It missed out on the top 10 for obvious reasons. But I got to show love to Darby and Sting versus the Men of the Year. Double or Nothing 2021. one of the most like fun, exhilarating, fulfilling pro wrestling matches I can recall. It's easy to forget now, folks. It's easy to forget because he's done balcony spots and all this stuff. But Sting had taken a powerbomb from Brian Cage and he'd done some cinematic pro wrestling. And here he was with the singlet against the Man of the Year, who I've always been an Ethan Page fan. It's really cool for me to see him in this spot. This wasn't about them. It wasn't about Darby. It was about Sting. And I've often said that Double or Nothing 2021 is one of my favorite events ever because there was such a joyous energy to that occasion, crowds being back and just the excitement of the whole thing. And so while I couldn't work it on the top 10 in good faith, I have to mention it. Sting performing the way he did, the enthusiasm, the excitement. It was a wonderful moment. It's not a 4-star match or anything. It was very basic. They built to Sting's hot tag and it worked. It was great. But I did have to mention that because I remember having an absolute blast with it. A couple others here. A couple of openers, in fact. All Out 2021. Miro and Eddie Kingston. I think this one just falls short in terms of its finishing, touches. I think there's a couple of things I would change, but it's another conversation for another day. I don't love the transition into that final kick. But, God, it's a great opener. Eddie, I think in both of his outings in this spot, has proven how kind of valuable he can be in the opening match as a guy who makes a lot of a little. This match is a great example of that. Miro and Eddie both. Two of the great salesmen of this kind of wrestling generation. So, yes, it is, Jay. It's when he took his shirt off and had the singlet. It was a great moment. So, Eddie and Miro rocked it. Didn't quite make my top 10. I think you guys will not be surprised to know that Eddie is going to be appearing in some form or fashion later. But that is a great pay-per-view match. And then finally, one that I must admit I do concede the faults of, but I just remember having such a wonderful time watching it live. The Full Gear 2022 opener, 2021, good Lord, looking 6 months in the future, 2021 opener. Darby Allin and MJF isn't perfect. Sometimes they go a little bit too far into dance routine mode for me personally with the opening stuff. But there is a wonderfully authentic, dare I say, innocent nature to the way that match is wrestled early on. And it is a great contrast with who MJF is as a person, because the idea is he wants to wrestle a certain way here and win because he can't believe the idea that he can't out-wrestle Darby. He's stunned by it. So he's almost more stubborn in how pure he wrestles and how clean he wrestles. I always like that element of that match. And, it's very showy, but I think it works for that story. So I wanted to show love to those guys too, because I remember vividly enjoying that, even if, a couple gripes, which again, that's whatever, right? I'm a nerd. I'm out. So there are some. I'm going to put folks' list, not going to read them through just because, I think I'm going to be talking about a lot of the same matches here. But I'll put these on the screen when I see them, and you guys can read through accordingly. Now, let's get into my list. Let's do this thing because I've been talking for 15 minutes, which is probably not ideal. Let's go here. Okay. Number 10, we immediately get into the outlier that I referenced earlier. Stadium Stampede 1. The Elite and Matt Hardy versus the Inner Circle. This is not a match for star ratings. This is not a match for technical analysis or fundamental acclaim. It is something that I think is hugely significant in AEW history, is greatly important to my personal fandom, and I know it's dumb, I know it's silly, I know it's self-indulgent and goofy and loud and dumb, but I adore this thing. And I think it's easy to forget just how much the wrestling world, and I say this with a complete awareness of, how little that means in the grand scheme of things. But I think it's easy to forget how much the wrestling world needed this at this time. And it was a great moment. We're at number 10. Yes, we just kicked off the list itself. I did cut one honorable mention. Number 10, Stadium Stampede. 1, that is. I think this is a huge match for creating AEW's kind of positive identity and something that people happily attach themselves to as an escape. Wrestling is supposed to be an escape, right? It's supposed to be kind of all action escapism. And I think this match, while they'd already achieved that in their kind of 6 months, or I guess year existence, but 6 months of TV, 7 months, this is the one that really cemented them as a positive kind of outlet for folks watching this product. So again, I'm not saying, if you if it's not your thing, I completely get it. It's very comedic and very, goofy. But man, I think it's just a great time. And I think it's, to me, the natural choice. I'm going to pick one from this time when, things were the way they were. I think this has to be it. Because this is the one that escaped those confines and gave everyone a chance to just have fun with pro wrestling again. And Brody and Mox killed it absolutely. They nailed it, and so did Sheeta and Nyla, as I mentioned earlier. But this is the one we'll remember, I think. This is a special occasion. If you did it now, I'm not sure I'd love it, because there's arenas now, and as Mox said, we ain't doing that shit. But this one, the original, a huge hit for this brand, I think. So there you go. Number 10, locking it in, Stadium Stampede 1. Okay. Now, did I say 1? It's not 1. 10. It's the first thing I've read. It's not, to be clear, folks, do not go to Twitter yet. It's not number 1. It's number 10. Number 9. We go before that 2+ year block of insanity. We go to Revolution 2020. Pac versus Orange Cassidy. Now, this may be surprising to some of you, because this is, I guess, leaning very comedic here early. I think this match is more than just, a fun comedy match, though. There you go. I said it right, me. You said. There you go. Rare instance of joking the Shems. Rare. Pac and Orange Cassidy is a classic to me, and not in the way that Stadium Stampede is. I just think this is, by definition, great pro wrestling. Two clearly defined personalities that are completely at odds with each other, cooperating in the least cooperative fashion, going just far enough in one direction that the audience borderline loses hope, and then swinging violently opposite direction and giving them so much hope that they think they're about to see an upset. Does pro wrestling get any more simple, any more effective than this? I'll be honest with you guys. We started the distraction in January 2020, and I started watching AEW. I caught up on all their TV and watched through from there so we could talk about it. And I liked the product. I thought their build-up to Revolution 2020 was actually spectacular. But I didn't fully understand Orange Cassidy. I don't think that makes me, an outlier. Obviously, I was aware of Fire Ant and some of it, but I hadn't really seen this character much. And as you guys will know, I'm very much late to these kind of things, and I was late to this. That's fine. I didn't really get it, and so there was this effect that it had on me that I actually think it had on a lot of people in this instance, which is that when they kind of teased that Pac was just going to run him over, I think it was very easy to buy, honestly. Pac had been so protected. He was days removed from a classic Iron Man. And so I think this match had genuine kind of uncertainty as to how far they were going to go with the presentation here. And I know there was a lot of debate. And look, here's the thing with Orange. I think it's a fair conversation to have about, how easy it is or how difficult it is to book him as a main event singles guy. I've referenced this before, and, I've talked about some of the challenges that come with that. And I think they've been evident in the last 2 years, and I say that as a big fan because of this match and what he's done, elsewhere. But this is a great example of what he can add to a roster in terms of variety and in terms of a range of, stylistic touches. It is wrong to frame Orange Cassidy as merely a gimmick or merely a bit. He is a great pro wrestler, and I think in every opportunity he got, in this particular match especially, he proved it quite emphatically. I just love the dynamic of Pac, who gets actively upset at the fact that this guy won't fight him, and Orange Cassidy. I think it is money. Their ring match on TV wasn't the same. Well, it didn't click the same way, and it was a different time, and there was a different, much smaller crowd, and I know Orange got hurt on the finish, and it didn't work the same way. But this was a special, special match, and the key is, while it isn't maybe the best, one of the top 10 best matches in AEW pay-per-view history, I think it's clearly one of the top 10 most memorable. And for me, it is ninth in terms of my personal favorites. I absolutely love this, and I'll always remember it, especially because it was a big one for me in terms of figuring out what this Orange Cassidy character was and how much I could enjoy it. When at the time, frankly, I was kind of, stuck in my ways in terms of what I could like and dislike. I got bad in that way. I think a lot of wrestling fans go through that stage, and I guess in a lot of ways that early 2020 run broke me out of it. This match being a key stop along the way. Okay, so we have 10 Stadium Stampede 1 and 9 Pac versus Orange Cassidy Revolution 2020. Okay. We stick with Revolution, but we jump 2 years forward. The dog collar match, CM Punk versus MJF. Now, this is a little bit of a strange asterisk this one's going to have. And you guys may disagree, you may agree, I don't know. I think this match was vaguely polarizing and divisive, but mostly people loved it. Of all of these 10 matches, this is the one I will be least likely to rewatch on a whim. In this one particular case, however, I mean that as a compliment. Now, hold the phone. I know what you're thinking. That makes no sense. You've immediately corrupted your own list. I know, I understand, I'm full of shit. We've already conceded that, okay? Let's just leave it there. I think when you have a build this hot, and people are this excited about a match, and, we can talk through the build and all the excitement that they capture with their promos and their angles and such. I thought their stylistic choices here and the way they approached this was honestly incredibly ballsy and very in line with everything we've got from CM Punk thus far. In that, rather than kind of doing what I think would have been the easiest thing to do, which is get straight to it, wild brawl, blood, gets the Wardlow pop and leave it there. I think they did something far more extended, far more elaborate. And while for some it dragged, I just can't say that it did for me. And look, the chat, there you go. There's a couple people in the chat. I said I did get the sense this was pretty divisive, this one. I just think, personally, it is very difficult to do dog collar match in a way that is like truly built for like raw excitement or star rating acclaim in 2022. So I thought it was awesome the way they went with this. And I absolutely adored the kind of drawn out, violent way they approached MJF getting his comeuppance. Obviously, they had some bells and whistles along the way, the Wardlow finish being the main one. I love some of the mind games early, with rather than being like a wild animal in there, instead, Punk was almost taking pleasure in the fact that MJF knew that he was fucked. He knew. I remember vividly the spot where he hooked it around the ring post and pulled him back. And it was this idea that you can do this match multiple ways, and I think the crowd will love it. The way they did it, to steal a word from the chat, was brave. It's it's going to be divisive because it was slow, and I see folks talking about it in the chat, and I don't disagree. It was slow moving, and it was drawn out, and they took their time. But in my view, that here was a compliment to the match. I thought they made bold choices but ultimately admirable choices. And they gave you an old school dog collar match, and that's such a cliche term. What I mean is CM Punk match. Just be honest, just stop with the old school. It's CM Punk. He was exactly in line with everything he gave you so far, other than one, which will come up. And he punished MJF. And it was violent, it was brutal, and there was a whole lot of blood. Punk's blood was borderline scary. These two can and did honestly have a better straight professional wrestling match. They did it in Chicago. I think that goes without saying. But this wasn't that, and I think this was, the final touch to a great angle and a great program. A challenging task that I thought they managed just about perfectly. So that is my number 8, CM Punk MJF dog collar match. Okay. We're going to kind of circle back on number 7. I mentioned I love this dynamic from Revolution 2020. So we're going now at Double or Nothing 2021. Kenny Omega, Orange Cassidy, and Pac. Their world title triple threat is my number 7. In my view, the most underrated, understated, underestimated title match this promotion's ever produced. Dare I say all of those things, pay-per-view match this promotion's ever produced. I have no clue why this match seems to be seldom talked about. I do not get it. To me, this is one of the more brilliant multi-man matches that I have ever seen. Yes, I'm going that far. I think it is an absolute triumph of layout and content and concept. It is just about perfect to me. Now, the finish itself, you could argue, is overdone with Don Callis, and that's fine. I actually thought it got good heat in the building. I haven't got any problem with the finish, but if that's an issue for you, that's fine. I just genuinely think this match gets nowhere near enough love, and maybe I'm in the wrong circles. Maybe I'm not. This thing's extraordinary in my view, and it had very little hype going in for me because they didn't really do much of a build. Because in this match, you have the aforementioned Pac Orange Cassidy dynamic, which, I think we all, I've established this point, but I think it's very, very simple. The kind of very, very angry Bret being actively mad at the lackadaisical Orange Cassidy. And you take that dynamic and you keep it there, you keep it present, you keep it rich, all that good stuff. But then you sprinkle Kenny Omega, whose offense always looks great, but on this night seemed to be particularly explosive, particularly dynamic. Cheese Nat mentioned in the chat that this was 27 minutes long, which stuns me because I've watched it multiple times. It never has felt that long. And getting the chance to watch Omega and Orange and kind of like their own version of that Pac kind of deal was just, it was fabulous. I really have nothing but positive things to say about this, which makes sense in my top 10 favorites. What I mean is the build itself, I guess we can pick holes in. I did pick holes in it on the distraction, but as a match, I don't think they could have done a better job with these pieces. And again, I will circle back because I've mentioned it already, and it's important because it is like a huge factor in this. Double or Nothing 2021 is a very special show, I think. I don't know if people fully, I won't say appreciate because we all like different things, but there's something special about the energy there, man. People are so happy to be there, and it's been so long since they had a crowd like that in attendance, but they're still home. It's special. And this title match, I think, is one of Omega's strongest matches in AEW. And it goes without saying the same for Pac and Orange. I think this match is absolutely masterful. And again, I understand why it's not as memorable because, the build, and it was obvious they wanted to do a title change, but absolutely love it. In at number 7, I have the Double or Nothing 2021 triple threat. Okay, it is half past, but there is no Bert line news. There is no Bob O'Neill segment. He simply forgot. The weekend carried him away. Bobby gets a little bit of a party animal. But yeah, he's not here, so I'll just continue on. If you want to know Bob's pick of the day, please tweet him at Robert O'Neill 31. I've said fake names so often for Bob that I forgot the real one. I think that's right. Anyway, let's move on here with our list. So far, we have Stadium Stampede 1, Pac and Orange Cassidy, Punk and MJF, and the Double or Nothing Triple Threat from 2021. All right. In at 6, call it overrated. Say I'm reaching. I don't care. We're back at Revolution 2022. Eddie Kingston, Chris Jericho. I know. I may be biased. Everyone knows the deal. This match has got a much lower rating on the cage match than most of these other ones I've talked about. It happens. You get what you get, I suppose. I don't care. I think this is one of the most startling triumphs in modern wrestling history. It is one of the most exciting pay-per-view matches they've ever produced. It has like 30 seconds of downtime. It is dramatic. It is physical. It's heated. It has extraordinary crowd heat from a crowd that people didn't even think that highly of. Frankly, the crowd was as loud as any AEW crowd I've ever heard for this thing. Now, I want to set the scene slightly. Let's not forget what this was and what this looked like. Okay? On one side, you've got Eddie Kingston, who I think is coming off of one of the best years of his career in 2021. I mean, honestly, altogether, the best year of his career, 2021. And especially a great final stretch of the year. However, King, had a broken orbital bone in January, right about the belt special at the tapings. And he has not wrestled a match in, I believe it was 7 weeks, maybe 6, but in that range. Eddie is great. He is many things. However, there is a fair, conversation about who his best matches will come against. And I don't know necessarily if you were making that list, you would immediately go to Chris Jericho. Now, you guys know, and this is me talking about my ass, you guys watched the I was pretty bullish on this being good. I didn't think it'd be this good, but I thought it'd be good. Eddie, I'm not worried about, but it isn't ideal that he's coming in after a layoff and an injury, and that obviously becomes Sorry, the confirmed shooters just text me in all caps. On the other side, Jericho, who is a legend and one of the greats, you could argue is like some years away from what you consider a truly brilliant performance. He has had good ones. He has been a great value to the television show at times, not all the time, but at times. Truly great singles performance. It's been a while. He's, getting up there. King is not the most dynamic athlete. This could be slightly tough fit for the opening match of an all-action, high-octane pay-per-view. And then, with one very dangerous suplex, everything changes. The crowd is, I can't overstate it, the heat for this match is honestly breathtaking. It is absurd how into this they are. Don't believe me? Go watch it back. Listen to the people on this. Jericho is so great in this match that about, a third of the way in, the crowd decides they're actually, not all of them, but a portion of the crowd says, that's Chris Jericho. They start chanting for him because he's a legend and they respect the performance he's putting in. And I think Oracle was the one that mentioned it on our show, our review show. But immediately when he hears that, Jericho is a dick to Aubrey. Just to firmly push them back in the other direction. And he's brilliant in this match. And he works at his eye and King sells it with everything he's got. And it's physical and violent at times. And the chops are, poor Chris is red raw in the chest. And you also have the drama of the finish. Eddie winning the big one. An absolute triumph. Everything that makes wrestling great in a lot of ways. There was a lot of factors working against this, but you had 2 guys the crowd cares about, and more importantly, 2 guys that know what they're doing. And they took that investment and they absolutely just charged forward with it. A complete home run. They couldn't have a better match together if they, did it 100 times. This was perfect. Then they will never top this from a singles perspective. They may try. They probably will, honestly, but they'll never top it one-on-one. So, Chris Jericho, Eddie Kingston. That is in for me at the 6th spot. At 5, this one's going to be a little bit of a quicker explanation because I actually got a chance to talk about this recently on the Grin Grappler. Cody Rhodes, Dustin Rhodes, Double or Nothing 2019, the first AEW show. If you want to see kind of more elaborate faults, Screen Grappler Dustin Rhodes will capture it for you guys. But just to kind of capture the main feelings, for me and a lot of other people, this is the match that told us AEW may have stuff that we'll enjoy as kind of old fucks. I'm more open minded now, and I've grown to love a lot of the stuff that promotion's kind of known for. I love the big multi-mans and stuff, and you go through phases with this deal. But at the time, this match spoke to me in a way that like this is going to be kind of stuff from 2-3 decades prior. We hadn't seen in a long time on a national stage, and poor Dustin bled buckets, and it was emotional and it was heavy, and Jim Ross was clearly going through the same experience I just described because he seemed inspired by the whole thing. And it's a hugely important match for AEW's continued showcase of variety in ring, which is one of the things that makes that promotion great. They have a range of styles, and this one is the first that really showed what can be done with a clean slate. We can have the Bucks and the Lucha Bros, and we can have the SCU trios match, and we can have all this stuff, and it's all great. And for some of you guys, that's your favorite stuff of the show, and that's awesome. But for some of us, this was the one that told us there may be something here with AEW. And more than that, on a personal level, Dustin got to have the match of his dreams, so to speak. And I don't know, man. I think this is maybe the greatest example ever of like this. Just none of this happens without AEW existing, right? Like you may get Cody and Dustin, you probably do it, like Final Battle or whatever. It ain't this time, man. It ain't a full arena in Vegas doing Dusty chants, and it's just such a unique moment in time. And as the first pay-per-view classic of theirs, that's fair to say. I don't have anything came before it in terms of that show, but hugely significant. I've rewatched it multiple times. Obviously, I rewatched it a couple weeks ago, as I mentioned, and still holds up. It is absolutely remarkable match. And, very not dissimilar to what I said with King and Jericho. Lest we forget, Dustin hadn't wrestled a match in a year and had like 2 knee surgeries. And when he did wrestle, he didn't look too good. So, and Cody's always given the knock of the 3-star general. And man, I remember just thinking this thing may not be all that. And not only was it, good, it was great. It was a classic. So, there you go. Okay. So, we're now, as the first of our top 5, we now head number 4. We move back to a familiar place. I've mentioned it a few times now. Double or Nothing 2021. Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley versus the Young Bucks for the AEW World Tag Team titles. There are a few things, very few, but a few things that stop this from being, frankly, number 1 with a bullet. Firstly, and I say this as someone that never has a problem with it, and I think they're one of the greatest teams to ever live, arguably the greatest. I do think it is excessive at times how long both Bucks are in the ring. And very seldom do I care about these things, but I do think that is a problem here. It makes Eddie look borderline dumb when he is standing on the apron. That's one. I just have to say it because a big part of me wants to be number 1, but I have to be honest about why it's not. Secondly, finish is flat, which is effective. But when you're talking about favorites, I think with a different finish, this becomes the favorite. And that isn't even a criticism as much as it's just that's the way it works, right? It'll make more sense later. So you need a certain final touch of triumph, I think, to really make it the true single favorite. So there's just a couple of things, but let's talk on the positive side. I often, have referenced in this show how special Double or Nothing was, and the crowd and the excitement of having fans back. But this entrance is that, captured perfectly in one snapshot, right? Wild Thing blaring and And King getting his first chance to actually walk in front of a full crowd because he wasn't on the TV before, which I'm pretty sure did have the Daily's Place crowd. And, saving it for this moment, and Mox being delighted at how loud it was, and Mox's sheer intensity and energy. Wow. The best entrance probably the promotion's ever hosted, other than maybe Punk coming out at the first dance, which fair. But it's special. It's one of the greatest entrances I've ever seen. The match itself is great. You get double heat. Moxley makes the big hot tag initially. They do a whole, false finish with the spray can and all that deal. And then they build with a double heat. They build to Kingston's one. And you get, and I've said this before, and it will always stick with me. You get something that I truly thought had died with WCW. Thank goodness it has, and I haven't heard it much since, unfortunately. But when Eddie makes his hot tag and he's throwing punches, the crowd starts doing that old school, like, boom, boom on every punch. They're doing the boom. And I swear, as inside baseball and nerd as it sounds, that honestly adds a half a star for me. Because if you guys have watched any old school Southern wrestling, any old school pro wrestling, probably in general, but I always think of it with early WCW and NWA and stuff. Crowds used to always do that for comebacks and hot tags. They would pop for like each punch, you know? And I hadn't heard it in some time. They did it here for King. Go back and watch it. You can hear it. It's awesome. So this match is incredible. A great example of what I talked about when I reviewed Ishii and King in terms of how sometimes the styles that are most different gel the most seamlessly. And I think that's the Bucks' life story anyway. I think they're great at that. I think they're so adaptable in that regard. But, I mean, look at their series of matches with Eddie Kingston, right? Look at the follow-up match with Penta. I mean, the hardcore one, I don't love Eddie in those kind of walk and brawl plunder matches, but the one they do at Daily's Place where Penta and Eddie beat them is incredible. Great match. So there's a contrast here that is just magic, and it is a great, great match. I've probably rewatched this one most, I'd say, on this list. The Bucks, Eddie Kingston, John Moxley. Amazing match. Okay. We stick with the tag titles. We stick with the Young Bucks. We move a year and change prior. Revolution 2020. Kenny Omega, Hangman Page versus the Young Bucks. I'd imagine for a lot of you guys, this is number one. I promise the fact it's not for me is more me speaking to what I think of the two matches above it. This match is iconic. I believe it is the highest rated match in AEW history. I think, in terms of Uncle Dave and cage match and all that stuff. And for me, as someone that loves tag team wrestling, AEW was immediately appealing in that regard. Tag team wrestling has a clear ceiling in WWE. And, the truth is that with the Young Bucks Central, the hope would be that this would, be a major calling card for AEW. So yeah, I wanted tag team wrestling to be important. And obviously the Bucks stuff with the Lucha Bros was beloved, and they had the incredible crazy ladder match at All Out. At Full Gear, the tag titles, were kind of, I think the titles were secondary to the Bucks versus Santana and Ortiz. They kind of stepped back, and SCU, great as they are, I don't think they were the most main event marquee champions. They dropped them to this kind of makeshift team of Hangman and Kenny. But I've always been a firm believer, and I just listed Eddie and Mox a minute ago. I resent this idea and this kind of weird notion about what tag teams are supposed to be, Like there's this weird thing that tag teams need to be like, they need to have a team name and have the same gear and have this. In many ways, Hangman and Kenny were what, when the iconic All Japan tags with the pillars would team. That's what this was the best comparison you can make. And this match is, US wrestling's equivalent in many ways. I'd imagine there's some melodrama here that rubs people the wrong way. Not me at all. Simply put, and I mean this as no slight to Hangman, who is honestly, in many ways, the heart of the match. He's the emotional kind of core of the match. I have to say that when you put Kenny Omega's brain with the Young Bucks, you give them about 30, 35 minutes, these dudes can come up with some shit that, quite frankly, there's like a handful of wrestling minds ever would match. And it may not be for everyone, but it certainly was for that live crowd and for the masses that watch this pay-per-view. The absolute innovation and creativity and nuance and detail and the way that they combine it with like the most expert execution of these moves and the timing on everything, it is insane. To this point about the kind of melodrama, and I touched on it, but like I think the key with this is they told this story over TV. This felt conflicting for these guys. It felt like they were getting pulled apart emotionally. And they just simply furthered that story, not only furthered it, spotlighted it, and made it the centerpiece of their match. I think that's very different to inventing, emotion in the midst of it all because you want it to feel more heavy than it is. And the crowd felt everything because they'd established on TV. I really do. So I think that match is, you could very fairly say it's the best match in AEW history. You could very fairly say it's the best tag match ever. I don't have it there, but I don't disagree. It's that good. So how about it? If it's your number one, I understand. It is a masterpiece, and I also love this too. Cheese now brings it up. I love the dynamic of Matt very much being the real antagonist. That is very that allows for a great element of Kenny and Nick kind of being in the middle of this. Nick less so, obviously, but it is neat, and there's some great moments where Hangman and Matt go head to head. Great match. A classic, obviously. I'm not saying anything new here. We now move into the top two. I'd imagine most of you will know what the top two are at this point. I'd assume. And when I say two, I think you'll know one. In at two, Full Gear 2021, CM Punk, Eddie Kingston. So, I think not only is this one of the great matches in AEW history, I think it is clearly the most unique. I think it is clearly singular in terms of what they did stylistically and the story they were telling. This was unique across the board. They had 2 weeks to build this thing. They had some heated promos. They had one that really captured the imagination in ring. And the go home week was just a pull apart in the parking lot deal. And that's, that was all they had. That was all they needed. And there was something very special about the way that weekend felt from this match's perspective. Here you have two guys that kind of made for each other in a lot of ways, right? Like you have two guys that were around each other back then when they were young and new to the game and are both loud and in your face and unapologetic in a very contrasting way. Eddie is kind of straight ahead and loud and heart on sleeve kind of character, whereas Punk is more clever, cutting, cocky, and you have this kind of natural. They feel like two guys that would just inevitably clash, right? So you have that, but then I combine that with the fact that while they may seem made for each other, they never wrestled each other. It's strange. And what made it so special on that weekend is I just vividly remember there being a lot of talk of this crowd's going to be nuts. I remember hilariously, not a reference I'll make often, but I remember Max Caster tweeting a video from he did a concert and he asked the people who they want to win the matches, and that place just exploded with chants for King. And, that's one thing, right? It's a small group and whatever. They showed the graphics for the matches, and the crowd was popping on each graphic, cheering. They got Kenny and Hangman tonight, again this, again that. When this one came out, they didn't just pop, they popped and then immediately erupted into the Eddie chants. And you have all this excitement, and we always do this thing with these matches where we go, listen, They shouldn't go out there and just lock up and grab a hold. They should go out there and fight. And I always would think, what does that actually mean? But what is that as a main event marquee match? What does that actually look like? How do you do that in a way that is convincing without completely killing, the kind of thing that the audience really wants to see, which is just a great, a great show, so to speak. How do you find the balance between excitement and realism and, what makes sense of the story? Most guys don't try. Most guys just have their normal match and that's that, and that's fine. And, that's kind of what we've come to expect. Now, in this one, not only did they give you that brawl, did they give you that fight? I think they jammed it in like 12 minutes, maybe just slightly less. The iconic opening of the back fist straight before the bell, the sheer desperation of Eddie in pursuit of Punk and how happy he was when he made Punk bleed, and Punk's face when he found, saw the blood in his own head and kind of looked almost inspired by it and reminded of what this was like. It's so different to everything else Punk's done since he came back because it's wild and frenetic. I think this match was the same length as his match with QT Marshall on TV. It's chaos. It's just, you can feel it. And here's the thing. In 10 years when people rewatch this, I don't know if it will hit the same way because I don't know if you can recapture necessarily the magic that we felt watching this live. But as someone that did feel that magic, it's with me every time I rewatch it. I can still feel it. And the crowd reminds me of those, just that big fight feel these guys had built. And to be kind of daring enough to actually try to cash in on that big match feel and create something truly different on a show filled with long, excessive, sequence-heavy matches. They just went out and fought each other. I mean, there's a near fall in the match. Eddie was there to beat Punk up and did that. And Punk survived and eventually, felt like he was vindicated by the fact that he outlasted King, put him down with... By the way, watch how Eddie takes that second GTS. It looks brutal. Add to it the little pre-GTS deal where he gets booed and looks at the people. It's awesome. Post-match, no handshake, and, Punk being like, well, it's the guy that I told you he was. It can't be the end. We have to see this. We have to see this run back. We have to see the sequel to this someday. I think it'll be a huge miss if they don't do that, like a genuine error. But as a single piece of wrestling history, it is one of the more striking moments, programs, matches that I can recall. I honestly have no really good comparison for it. And I don't think there is one in the last few decades, honestly. Maybe I'm nuts. Maybe I'm missing something. When I think of US mainstream or national wrestling, this was dramatic and visceral in a way that is just a completely lost art. Remarkable match. Loved it. A brawl. And so many great touches. Punk with the trunks. King with his hands taped. The lack of pomp and circumstance, the whole thing. Amazing. Okay. You ready, folks? That was number 2. So let's run this down here. Let's do a little recap over a TV show. We had Stadium Stampede 1 was at 10. Pac and Orange Cassidy was at 9. Punk and MJF at 8. The Double or Nothing 2021 Triple Threat match at 7. Eddie Kingston, Chris Jericho came in at 6. Cody and Dustin at 5. The Bucks versus Eddie and Moxley at 4. At 3, we have the Revolution tag of 2020. And then, of course, as I just talked about, at 2, Eddie Kingston, CM Punk. Number 1, you probably guessed it. It is All Out 2021, signature match of that pay-per-view, that very memorable pay-per-view. The cage match for the tag team titles, the Lucha Bros, and the Young Bucks. Now, I mentioned earlier that one thing that can hurt these matches or limit them in terms of favorites is the finish. I think this is one of the most complete title change presentations that I have ever seen. And I understand some of the stylistic issues with it. I know it's been slightly polarizing, and I get it. I completely understand it. But to me, this does something very special. And here's why I would, this is why it's my number one. We'll kind of bring this all around. So, well, this rules. Bill says, this is quite literally the match that got me back into wrestling. There you go. You had a choice here, to me, that they could make. They could do the more kind of sequence heavy, high spot oriented, cool move show, which they've done before, and they're like the four of the best guys in the world that can do that kind of thing. Especially, bless Penta, but he's the other three guys, especially, are kind of made to do that, especially Nick and Phoenix. So you can do that, or you can go with what the go home segment, which was a all heat angle in the middle of the cage, what that was kind of screaming for, which was a bloodbath, right? And I'll never forget on the go home grin, I was talking about what they'd do and kind of speculating. And in 20 minutes, to me, they managed both, which is incredible. In that, to me, going with that option would kind of undercook both elements. It didn't at all. The sequence stuff is there early. And it isn't for everyone, I get it, but I just think they're so brilliant and so creative. That's, for me, it's a blast to watch. I really do love it. But then when the Bucks really get some heat in there and Penta starts bleeding, there is a degree of drama that is added to this match that is genuinely just out of the realm of where wrestling was at in 2021 and is at in 2022. Genuinely. There's some crazy stunts and spots and stuff, but the things that I remember from this match, which is the visuals of the blood, I'll never forget Penta coming across to protect his brother and kind of daring him to take him out instead and taking the bullet and stuff like that. Those little pieces of humanity, which is why I love tag wrestling. It isn't a coincidence. 3 of my top 4 are tag team matches. I think there's such an element of humanity to tag team wrestling, whether it's brothers team with each other, it's best friends, whether it's rivals, whatever. We can all relate to those those personal dynamics that make tag wrestling special. They were really palpable in this one. And it had heat unlike any match you will see in this day and age. And honestly, it's a matchup and a pairing that I'll never expect to get this kind of heat. To me, this matchup screams showy, flashy. It does not scream emotion and drama and, passion. But that's where it was. And this is perfectly put here. Ibby says, that drama feels so sudden in the match because there was no emotional build, but it still worked. It shouldn't have worked, but it just did. There is something so beautiful about this match. Said it way better than I ever could. That's exactly it. And I think a big part of it, honestly, as weird as it sounds, I think that entrance is a special moment in AEW history. I think it sets the stage for everything that follows. I think it elevates that match to being truly special in a way that you just can't, you couldn't predict going in. AEW history for me, I'll always remember the reaction when they won those belts, the visual of Penta and just how overjoyed he looked with the blood and the mask, and then the guys kind of get him to hurry up, and he waited and called his kids over, and just will stick with me forever. It was the best of both worlds in a truly special way. It had all the spots you could ever ask for, and it was all done perfectly. And I love that stuff. I admire that stuff. But what it really did at core was it made me feel something. And there's just snapshots of it I will never ever shake. I think that's the match from that show. And I think they've had a little bit of a tough time since. But to me, I would like all tag title changes to feel as epic as that one did. And that's a credit to the Bucks as champions. So there you go, folks. This rundown is 10-1 last time. We're exactly the hour. So let's take this thing home. I'm gonna go 10-1. We have Stadium Stampede, Pac versus Orange Cassidy, Punk versus MJF, the Double or Nothing 2021 Triple Threat, Eddie Kingston, Chris Jericho, Cody and Dustin Rhodes, famous Double or Nothing 2021 match, the Bucks versus Kingston and Moxley, the Revolution 2020 tag, Eddie Kingston, CM Punk, and in the top spot at number 1, All Out 2021, the cage match, Lucha Bros, Young Bucks. Folks, I hope you've enjoyed this. This has been a lot of fun, something a little bit different. I want to stress again, favorites, the stuff I left off, it's just didn't connect for me. Your list may be completely different. I do think it's worth saying the Bucks come up 3 times in the top 4. And they're pretty good. That was a lot of fun. Hope you enjoyed this as a way to kick off Double or Nothing week, which is kind of unofficially an AEW-centric week here for the Grin. We're back later tonight. If you're watching on YouTube, it will probably be posted tomorrow, but nonetheless, tonight on Twitch at 6 p.m. Eastern, myself, Alex, and Oracle are going to do Grin Grappler, William Regal. If you want to know the matches, you still got time to watch them. At Late Night Grin on Twitter, it's the pin tweet. We have 6 matches, 3 acts of Regal matches to talk through. That'll be tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern on Twitch, and I'll post it to YouTube tomorrow. Then, tomorrow, in the usual Bert time slot, we're behind the paywall for a Q&A show. Maybe Jack will show, I don't know, but it'll be very informal as usual. Tomorrow night, I want to push this hard. 7 p.m. Eastern, tomorrow night on this very platform, the All-Star AEW Draft. 3 teams, 6 grinners, picking from the stacked AEW roster. And that's just the start, folks. We've got a lot of other stuff this week. I hope you've had a good time. I hope you've had a good day so far. I hope it continues to be so. And either way, I hope to see you tonight for the illustrious Grin Grappler. If you watch on YouTube and you enjoyed it, give us one of those thumbs up gimmicks. And until next time, folks, in the meantime, please do enjoy this outro. All hell.